In the current 2015-2016 season, Kawhi Leonard is averaging about 21 points, 7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and nearly 2 steals. Gordon Hayward is averaging about the same at 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1 steal. They're very comparable players when you look at their stats. However, very few people would say that Gordon Hayward is on the same level as Kawhi Leonard, who's already won an NBA championship along with Finals MVP and Defensive Player of the Year honors. But how do we know they aren't on the same level? Do we just know because we're all basketball geniuses? What if I didn't give you the names of the players? How would you know which one was better? Let's find out together. Before we get started, make sure you watch to the end of this video to see how you can get free NBA tickets from Game Time, who was kind enough to sponsor this video. Game Time is the easiest way to buy event tickets. There's a link in the description to download the app as well as our discount code, which we'll talk about more at the end of this video. When it comes to analyzing basketball, there are generally two opinions. Numbers never lie and numbers don't tell the whole story. For those who say that numbers never lie, well, they kinda just did. Just because Kawhi Leonard and Gordon Hayward averaged nearly exactly the same numbers does not mean they are equal players. The people who subscribe to the second train of thought cling to what many call the eye test. This super scientific method says that you can tell how good a player is by watching him play. Now, to a certain extent, this is true and an important element of judging players. However, what we see is really subject to perception. The eye test should really be called the eye test because it basically comes down to what I think based on what I see. So what's the point? The point is that you have to take both aspects into consideration, but you have to be looking at the right things, the right numbers, and the right film. Let's look at one very important number, win shares. What are win shares? In a nutshell, win shares is an advanced stat that calculates how much a player contributes to, well, winning. Because that's all that matters, right? Teams recruit players because they think they can help them win. You play to win the game. Winning is the end goal. Steph Curry didn't win MVP because he was a good three-point shooter. There were players who shot better than him from the three-point line. He won MVP because his team won games, largely due to his contributions on the court. Win shares helps us measure that. In fact, in the 2014-2015 season when he won league MVP, Steph Curry had the most win shares per 48 minutes. Okay, so how are win shares calculated? First, offensive win shares and defensive win shares are calculated. Offensive win shares takes into account the total points a player scores, how many offensive possessions that player had, the average league points per possession and points per game, and the team pace and league average pace. Defensive win shares takes into account a player's defensive rating, which is a whole other story, the number of defensive possessions a player had, the league average points per possession and points per game, and the team's pace and league average pace. The sum of a player's defensive win shares and offensive win shares is his total win shares. As you can see, win shares is not a one-dimensional stat like points per game or assists per game. That's why it's called an advanced stat. It takes everything into account and makes it all make sense. When people say numbers don't tell the whole story, it's because they're not looking at the right numbers. But does this actually work? Well, let's go back to the two players we mentioned at the beginning of this video, Kawhi Leonard and Gordon Hayward. At this point in the 2015-2016 season, Gordon Hayward has 7.2 win shares. Kawhi Leonard has 11.8. Gordon Hayward's win shares per 48 minutes is .144, while Kawhi Leonard's is .283. The numbers tell us what we already know. Kawhi Leonard is a better player because he helps his team win more games than Gordon Hayward does. Now you could say, well, the Spurs are a better team than the Jazz. They win more games, so Kawhi Leonard gets more win shares. Well, as you probably noticed earlier, win shares does not include anything that will reflect how well the team performs, only how well the player performs and contributes to team wins. For example, Kevin Love averages respectable stats at about the same amount of minutes as Gordon Hayward does, but for a much better team. better record equals more win shares, right? Actually, no. Kevin Love has 7 win shares to date. DeMar DeRozan also plays for a much better team, but has 8.2 win shares to date. Let's see how the win shares stat can help us find the truly valuable players. We compared 14 players on 12 different teams with different records, some good, some not so good. Then we ranked them based on their win shares per 48 minutes. Now, of course, players like Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James came out on top. That's not eye-opening. But we can also see how a star like Jimmy Butler, despite being on a team with a mediocre record, can shine, thanks to the win share stat. Even players like Anthony Davis, Damian Lillard, and James Harden, who are on average or disappointing teams record-wise, show their true value. On the other hand, if you are wondering why the Kings and Knicks are struggling, it's because their stars are not contributing to winning much at all. So let's recap. What are win shares? Win shares is an advanced stat that isolates a player's individual production offensively and defensively and shows how much that player contributes to winning. Win shares can be used to evaluate a player's true value when basic stats and the all-inclusive eye test isn't enough. Win shares isn't the only stat or variable to take into account when determining a player's value, but it's a good place to start. Thanks for watching this video. If you're an NBA fan and enjoy fact-based rankings and player insights, subscribe to the channel. Now, about those free tickets I mentioned earlier. If you haven't heard of the Game Time app, go download it right now. There's a link in the description. Game Time is literally the easiest way to buy tickets. You can see the view from the seats before you buy them, pay by taking a picture of your debit card, which then remains on file for future use, and you don't have to print anything. There are tickets available right now for literally $9, and if you use the promo code MTV, you'll get $10 off your purchase, which means those tickets are free. You're welcome, have fun. We've posted a full review of the app on our new Gaming and Apps channel, so make sure you check out that video for more information. There's a link in the description. Again, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media to see previews of our videos before we post them, and follow me on Twitter at @MTV_Sydney.